Just started.
Perfect. Because I know Larry wants to make sure that we can get it posted somewhere he can get to it afterwards.
As did Lori.
Yep. Yep, I got hers as well.
Yeah.
So maybe wait one more minute and we'll get started.
Sure. And for all of you, do note that if you're not talking, definitely mute your microphones. You don't have to, it's up to you. But by clicking the mic mute button in the lower left-hand corner of your window, you can control whether or not we hear everything that's going on or not. And if things get really bad, then I'll just turn off everybody's microphone. But I don't want to do that sort of dictatorship style.
Looks like this may be it. So how about we get started? Work for you?
Yep.
Cool. So welcome everybody. Thanks to Joe for setting these up. He knows this a little bit better than I do. Our first PLC meeting. I have a question to everybody first. Was everybody on the CRT wide meeting, I guess Monday? Anybody on that? Unfortunately, I have to teach at the time of the Zoom meeting, so I can't go to pretty much any of them. It's happened before. I sent so Brett sent out another notice today, and I said, I'm sorry I can't be there, and he said it's okay because my makeup options include happy hour, special SI favors, etc. So the point here is, if you don't make all of them, you certainly can listen to them online, and that's you definitely should do that. They're going to start trying to keep track. So if you didn't go or couldn't be there, do listen when you get a chance. It's not to say that you can't have it kind of in the background while you grade your papers. I've done that before. But how's everybody doing? Has anyone started their course redesign at this point? I don't see a whole lot of shaking heads. I don't see anything in the chat. So it looks like everybody's kind of holding back a little bit. That's fair. One of the things that I wanted to do was share with you some of the things that we've done here on the Chico State campus to help the course redesign team. Not necessarily just this cohort, but in general, course redesign. One of the things that I've done is worked with the, sorry about that, that's my computer making noise. I've worked with the Faculty Development Office to work with the institutional research group on campus to try to get data in support of the course redesign projects. One of the things we did last year is we collected, through the Faculty Development Office, all of the different classes that faculty wanted to compare for their course redesign. And so you get essentially data from all the classes that came before, and in theory, the class that you're redesigning now. Now, because we had so many redesigns on campus, we tried to do it all at once with one request. That didn't work so well. IR had a really hard time with that. They appreciated the fact that we got everybody together at one time, but there were so many classes involved that we didn't actually get all the data we requested. Some of it came back wrong, some of it came back incomplete. And so we're going to do things a little bit different this year. In the next week or so, I'm going to put forward a request to IR to get all of the pre-data from all our redesigns across the Chico State campus, so that we'll have that data going into the redesigns. Now, ideally, I would have done this 4 or 5 weeks ago, but that's just not the way life happened. But if you can find a way to pull that off and get your data from the courses you want to compare to. So maybe you are redesigning in spring 18 and you want to compare it to spring 17. Go get the spring 17 data now, start analyzing that data now, because you have time before stage 4 is due in April, May, whenever it is, sometime late in the spring. You can have that ready. It's ready to go when you've got your redesign data at that time. It saves some of the workload, because I think Joe will agree, the biggest workload to all of this happens between stage 3 due date, stage 4 due date. You're not only potentially redesigning your course, you have to analyze all your data. You got to get it all done right before the June workshop, and you've only got 3 days. So the more you can do now, the better. What do you think, Joe?
Absolutely. And of course, that's not to say that you can't keep updating your ePortfolio after the June meeting, which I have, in fact, but it's nice to have at least a little bit of that data analysis ready for the CRT team. The parts they want, the table in the proper format with, all of that.
All of that. Now, Joe, what did you, when you went to your IR, what did you ask for? What kind of data did you ask for?
Fortunately, at Fresno State, I don't want to make anybody envious, but we have dashboards like the CSU dashboard. So I didn't have to actually talk to anybody, which is perfect for a biologist. I just had to get online and I could actually download all of the data myself. But I wound up grabbing mostly the class grades from the previous 7 or 8 iterations of this class. So at Fresno State, we've got data going back for almost a decade now, I think, in our system, which was really useful. But at the very least, get one set of data from the previous time this was taught, especially if it was by you, but if not by you, then anybody else is fine in comparison.
I got, when I did it, I also got, so I got grade data. I also went and got all the ethnicity data, gender data, Pell eligible data, underrepresented minority or not. Basically everything I could get my hands on to try to go into is kind of a deeper analysis. And one of the things I will say that's been very helpful for me, maybe you can, maybe you can't do this. I started working with a statistician on campus in the math department and really trying to do a deeper dive. I'm not a stats person. I know my chemistry really well, but stats are not my thing. And so I had Robin, for those on Chico State campus, Robin Donatello, she took a look at putting together some models and say, all of the things being equal, how important was the course redesign, or how important was course redesign plus SI? And so beyond just saying, hey, if you go to SI, your DFW rate is likely to be lower, we can actually say, hey, no, course redesign plus SI has a 99% chance of improving GPAs by 0.2 GPA units. That kind of a deep dive is a really nice thing to have. You don't have to have it for your ePortfolio, but I'll tell you what, administrators love it. You want to make a case for getting more funding or getting more buyout time or something, that kind of data is important. So I would recommend getting that. And if you can, find a statistician to work with.
Any questions or comments from the cohort on data analysis, types of data to collect?
I see the hamsters working.
Well, when I started this, I wasn't really sure what to expect in terms of whether or not grades would improve. And the first thing I did, of course, was look at the grade distribution, letter grade distribution from pre-redesign to post-redesign. And there was a little bit of a change maybe for the better, but not too much. And it's even harder when you are comparing different instructors. So when I redesigned, it was the first time I had taught this class. So I taught side by side, which was nice, a non-tablet based course and a tablet based course. So I did have sort of an internal control. But to compare to previous classes, I wasn't sure how to do that. And I settled on an approach which might be useful for others, which was, speaking of data to collect, looking at student grades, what their current cumulative GPA was coming into my class at the start of the semester, and comparing that cumulative GPA to the letter grade they earned in my class. So I could look at what's their average performance in a class versus how did they do in my class. Did they do the same? Did they do much better? Did they do much worse? And that one showed, of all of the different analyses I did, that one was the one that showed the most growth. That a lot of students did a lot better on average than they normally did. And you can break that down either by cumulative GPA across all disciplines, or you could do major GPA.
Now, Joe, what level class were you teaching? Which one was that?
That's sort of a junior level upper division genetics class.
Okay, so how did you pull out transfer students from that? Because their cumulative GPA will include scores from other schools. Were you only looking at GPA from Fresno?
Yeah, I was just looking at our GPA, campus GPA. But yes, you could. That's a good point. There are a lot of different cumulative GPAs to worry about.
For me, for my class, I have mostly freshmen, sophomores, so I don't have to worry about it too much. And it's an entry-level course, but I could totally see where it might be something to consider for a bit more of an upper division.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now my hamster wheel is spinning. Smoke coming out of my ears yet?
Now, one of the things we like to do at these meetings is kind of open it up for those that have something they want to discuss, something they've been thinking about, problems they've had. So although we will mostly sometimes come prepared with a topic to discuss, it is perfectly fine to address other issues. And at this point, does anybody have something they want to talk about? Something that's happened in their courses so far, something they're worried about, something they think they're going to have to tackle, anything at all. This is basically hi, my name's Eric. I'm redesigning my course, and this is a support group.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Joe. So I'll bring one up then. Yes, I come prepared most of the time. So I gave my first exam on Wednesday to my Gen Chem class. And as you know, does sometimes happen, there was an error on the exam. Despite proofreading, there was just an error. And so I found it, and I made an announcement to the class. And as might be expected, I got an email later the next day saying, let's just say that they were none too pleased and kind of raked me over the coals. So the question I have for you is, how would you guys respond to that kind of an issue? We all know that we're human. We all know that we make mistakes. It happens. You know, if I were all powerful, it would never happen. And I miss that omnipotency gene. So what would you do? How would you respond then to the student? What would you do?
Well, one thought is, first of all, to let the student cool off for a couple days and not to respond right away, because otherwise sometimes they'll treat it like sort of like a flame war with you. And the other thing is to address it with them in person rather than over email, because they tend to get a little more pissy they tend to get a little more upset over email. They tend to feel like they can say whatever they want because they're behind their screen. Yeah. So after a couple days, just saying, thank you for your concern. I really appreciate it, and I'd love to discuss this with you further. Can you stop by in my office hours? And I found that by the time they get to your office, they have calmed down significantly, and they're much more polite, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, those seem like good rules of thumb for dealing with any sort of student
Mm-hmm.
concerns. I had a somewhat related thing happen a week or two ago, and I tried my usual approach of not responding immediately, sleep on it, cool off myself, and then respond with something positive. Thanking, as you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
thank the student for bringing up the problem and for their concern. And that usually goes a long way. So, Eric, what was the specific concern about the error? Was it
waste of time?
Yeah.
So they wasted time so they could do so much better if they had, right. And you know as well as I do that often is not the case. That the amount of time is minuscule compared to the overall exam, but of course that's not something they're going to want to hear, and so you don't attack it that way.
Right.
No, I did. I did write back, and I said, I certainly appreciate your concern. I'm happy to discuss this with you if you want to come by my office. And nope, they don't want to come by the office. No surprise.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Combies.
Oh, I was going to say sometimes what I do is I just offer extra credit for catching mistakes, either during lecture if I slip up, or if on the exam there's a mistake, or if the textbook has some sort of typo or mistake.
Oh, that never happens.
So I try and give them extra credit. The people that do point out the problems, I give them extra credit, and that tends to quiet down the majority of the folks that are most likely to raise a fuss over mistakes.
In this case, I actually caught. Sorry. In this case, I actually caught the error, and so I was the one that let them know. What I'm doing is I'm wrapping it up. No pun intended. I'm wrapping it up into an exam wrapper. So I gave them an exam wrapper today. They haven't got the exam back yet. I've got half of it graded. But the exam wrapper that I give out has about 4 or 5 questions on it, where I ask them to answer things before they get their exam back. How did you feel you did? Where did you put your time in studying? Just stuff that they can answer. And then they'll get the exam back on Monday, and they can finish the exam wrapper. Now that you've got it back, how do you feel about the exam? Did things go right? Where did you miss points? Where do you think you could study differently, or do you feel you need to study differently? And I told them, I'm not going to read every last one of them, but I am going to provide points. If you do the exam wrapper, I will give you points for it. And so they effectively feel like they're going to get some free points. I feel like they're actually doing a metacognitive exercise, and we both win.
Absolutely. I'm trying out a new approach since we heard so much about metacognition at our recent meetings. And I did actually, I don't know, but maybe I should take a poll how everybody else feels about what they got out of our, I guess, workshop on the student skills, skills assessment?
Right.
Student knowledge survey. That was what it was. Where you ask the students at the start of the semester, sort of the generic, how well do you think you can answer this sort of question? Not at all, maybe, some of it, all of it. So I actually did incorporate one of those for my class. I give them their pre-start of term knowledge survey a couple of weeks ago. And I'm going to see how that pans out this semester. I spent most of my summer creating those tasks, those sort of generic statements about by the end of the chapter, you should be able to do this and this and this, the components of the knowledge survey. And we're a week away from our first exam in my genetics class now. And when students ask me, what should I study for? The best thing, if nothing else, is that I can tell them, I already gave you at the start of the semester, when we did this knowledge survey, I gave you all of the tasks for all of the chapters. Those are the points for studying, because those are the things I'm going to base exam questions on. And so in a week, I should know whether or not that wound up helping them learn or figure out what to study and what to focus on. So I'm kind of looking forward to that and seeing if that'll move the needle at all on student performance.
Is anybody else trying anything metacognitive this semester? Just curious.
Anything where anyone asking anything where students have to reflect on their ability to know what they know?
Yeah, I've given rappers before as well, and I really like them too. And my last question for them is always like, is there anything I can do to help you? There's something variation where I ask about me as an instructor, and I really like those comments. Even though like they're not anonymous, they're actually pretty honest, and a lot of times, sometimes they're really nice. They're like, nope, you're doing a great job, and that just makes you feel good. But other times too, they have a lot of good feedback. So I will always continue to do the rappers. Again, I also give like very minimal points, Eric, same thing. But I agree that, and I tell them, you get out of these what you put into them. If you are reflective, you will get better. Like these are meant to help. And I know, I love them. I think they're really great. Yeah.
I don't do as much actual giving them written questionnaires or surveys, but I do talk to them in class, you know, and ask them to reflect and give them quite a guilt trip often when they're not reflecting or when they're not coming to class with questions, when they're not really totally engaged in the material. And it's kind of obvious. The first part of the course, oftentimes they don't really know enough to know what exactly they need to be doing. And, you know, after the first midterm, they begin to try and figure things out a little bit. But yeah, before the first midterm, I do try and extract from them a little bit more metacognition prior to the first exam. After that, they normally begin to think about it on their own and come to terms with what they need to focus on.
I've given like the beginning of the semester, I have like a little info sheet that I ask the students to fill out, and one of the things says, you know, what can I do to help you enjoy this class and to learn more? And one of the things that I get a lot from our students, and it might be specific to our campus, is they'll say, I want the test problems in advance, or they'll say, I want your lecture problems to be almost identical to the test problems.
Yeah.
I think that's a byproduct of the way that, you know, students are being coached through the majority of their K through 12 education these days. Is that something that anybody else feels is a problem or that you've noticed?
Yeah, I think so. I've only been here at Fresno. I've only been a faculty member for 5 years, but even in that short period of time, I think there's been quite a shift in students wanting more or expecting more, I suppose, especially in that regard. I do a lot of surveying informally, usually using Socrative or something like that, the students, to ask them, yeah, how do you feel right now? What's your biggest fear was the most recent question I asked them.
Like that question.
You know, what are you most worried about right now about this class, and what can I do to help? And yeah, this semester so far, 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in now, it's been a lot of my biggest fear is I don't know what the exam questions are going to look like. And I reflect on my experience as an undergraduate. I never knew what the questions were going to look like. You had to be prepared. But most of my students now are saying, yeah, our biggest concern is we don't know what the exam questions are going to look like.
So I'm gonna take that one step further. I had a conversation with a colleague up here on the third floor just earlier today, who has some students in school, and he mentioned that they just went to back to school night, and he was told by many of his two students, their teachers, to not expect much homework. Now they're in high school. So the parents are being told, don't expect much homework for your kids. When I went to school, you had homework all the time from pretty much every class. I do wonder what that means in terms of study skills and the ability to answer questions that are different from the ones you've been given before. So, you bring up the point, companies that they, in the K through 12 system, are they essentially being trained to want those questions ahead of time? And I'm looking at what was told to me is questioning, how could they not want those questions ahead of time because they're not doing homework to practice it in any way? And then the question becomes, what do we do about it at the university level? Is it our job then as a university or as an instructor to teach study skills along with our content specialties? How do we do that? How do we make up for maybe 10 years of a lack of homework practice, a lack of learning the habits of studying?
I honestly think that this is a pervasive issue with society and the education system and the way that it's been going over the past 10, maybe even 10, maybe 15 years. And ultimately, I think it comes down to teachers sort of sidestepping their responsibilities to some extent and putting them on the digitization of education systems, all the online homework tools that are now out there and which school systems are signing up for. It kind of makes teachers think that, all right, it's dealt with. I don't have to deal with it. These online systems are taking care of it. But there's a huge disconnect, with the way that questions are posed in those kinds of automated homework type questionnaires or question systems, and real understanding of concepts and being able to apply them to new situations, which I think is really what students lack the capacity for nowadays. I think more than anything else, when students are taking my class, when I ask them to really apply knowledge to new situations, they totally, lack the capacity for it. And I think more than anything else, when they're asking for exam problems, they're really underneath it. They're asking, okay, what kinds of situations do you want me to apply this knowledge that we're covering in class to? Because they really lack the capacity to think outside the box and make those, apply that knowledge themselves. I think that's where it's coming from. There's a solution for it, but
yeah,
I definitely see that in my class.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it depends on the class level. Also the expectation we have from our student. So in terms of intro course, because we have more freshmen and sophomore, and I did see a lot of students really don't have study skill. This semester what I did differently is, from previous, I actually send almost email reminder out every week to tell students, say, okay, now you're up to where you need to read this chapter, you need to go through a PowerPoint, you need to do your homework, and you need to finish your worksheet. Because quite fun is in the intro level, a lot of freshmen or even sophomore, they really don't know how to study and they don't really know what to follow. And this semester, I actually have one student. He spent time on study, but he did really poor on our first two quizzes. And so I talked to him and I asked him, what did you do? And then I actually list out the entire week before the exam, our quiz week today. And these are what he need to do every day. So, okay, you have to read, go back chapter 1 on Monday, and then chapter 2 on Tuesday, and then chapter 3, and now we have chapter 7 on Wednesday, and then go through PowerPoint, not every day, but half on Wednesday, half on Thursday, and then we have a quiz on Friday, then you'll be prepared. So fortunately, he followed what I planned out for him. And I say, you have to read the entire chapter, not just read the fragment. Because what he did is he do the question, and then he read the section, and the question, section. I said, no, you cannot do that. So then he followed. So I finished grading his quiz today. So he jumped from 25% on the quiz 2 to 65% on quiz 3. Okay, and this is a guy actually follow what I tell him to do. And so I found that over the year, I did find more and more our students, they really don't know what to do. They don't know how to study. And we basically, I kind of basically feel like I'm not teaching a college student in the intro course, but teaching maybe, I don't know, high school, middle school kids, and then we, other than the chemistry, we actually have to teach them how to study and how to make a study plan.
Yeah, can I play devil's advocate? Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Nancy?
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I don't know if this is another way of solving the problem, is that a lot of my office hours, when I can get a classroom, I kind of turn them into an SI section. And so my students come in and they bring their laptops, and I kind of organize them into groups, and I kind of travel around between the groups, and I kind of help the students as they're working on problems, or I'll send some to the board and they'll work out problems with other students at the board. And kind of as they're going through, if I can, I'll point out, why did you use this number here? It's correct, but why did you do it? And try to get them to think that way. And I'm hoping that helps their study skills. The students who end up coming, they tend to do better, but then again, it could be the students who already were gonna do better that come, so.
I was going to say, I'm going to be devil's advocate here and say, what if it's just, the problem here is not necessarily that, the students aren't able to study or able to learn the material or aren't willing to, but if it's just the fact that we grew up in a very different environment and we're used to different study tools, study habits, and study methods. So these guys are, basically using digital online homework tools, which we've never used, and which may kind of force them to study in a very different manner that we didn't, or we never really used those approaches. Is there a way that we could take an approach that's more familiar to them and tweak it so that, we can get them to learn the way that we want them to learn, or learn the things we want them to learn, but in a way that's more palatable for them? And one of the ways that I've been trying to do that in my biochem course is by taking sort of online gamified virtual labs and having them try to apply some of the content that we cover in my biochem course, in a different situation, in these virtual labs that they're trying out. It's very, I think it's different from the kind of, simple multiple choice question type assessments that, homework assignments are normally given out as in these digital online systems. It's more of applying, there's much more application of your knowledge in that kind of a situation. And there's a lot more open-endedness as well in terms of what you do in those virtual lab type assignments. But at least it's on something that's a digital format, and many of the students might be a little bit more kind of used to that format. I'm not sure if anyone might agree, but is it possible that it's just the format of the homework or the assignments that's the problem? What do you guys think?
I'm not sure it's a format as a problem, but I'm actually going toward probably opposite from most of the people. Instead of going high tech, I'm actually going back more into pen and paper. And I found when I forced the student really actually had to use a pen and paper to do the question, to work out a question, they actually perform better in the exam. And part of that also, I think, because not all the students we have, they have a very good computer or or the internet connection at home. So that's I don't know, that maybe that's part of the problem when we assign online homework. Probably not all of them actually do it.
I agree. I think it's a debate. It can be debatable. Like, should we be teaching these guys the study skills that we use and we think are best? Obviously, they worked for us. Or should we be adapting? And I have this discussion a lot with, my fellow younger colleagues as well as my older colleagues. And obviously, the older colleagues are like, no, these are the, practice. These are what's the word? Proven ways to learn and stuff like that. So we should be getting them to read. We should be helping them adapt to these study skills. Adapt to our own study skills. And my younger colleagues, I also think that we believe that we should be adapting more towards what they know and what they're more used to. Exactly, the online stuff and more watching videos, right? They love the videos, whereas we never had those when we were younger. And so, I don't know. I definitely think it's debatable. I don't think there is a right answer. And I think all we can do is, our best for a cop-out answer.
Maybe a tangent, but I'm curious, as it's near or at the start of the semester for many of us, how much time do you or will you put into onboarding your students into how you're changing your classes, how you're redesigning? So for example, I use a lot of lecture videos I've recorded in the past, since we were speaking of maybe helping students with formats or content that they're more familiar with. So I've got a lot of lecture videos. We spend in-class time working on questions that I ask embedded in the videos. They come to class with answers. We go through the answers, how to solve the problem, and so forth. And I spent a couple of days at the start of the semester explaining to them how this is beneficial and why this is better than me lecturing to them. I did this mainly because in past semesters, my end of term surveys that I give my students, most of them say they actually prefer lecture. They don't prefer the flipped approach. They just want to come sit and absorb and take notes or not and just be there. They don't want to have to do that in advance and actually be active and engaged in the classroom, which is horrible, but that's the reality for my situation anyway. So I'm wondering again if anybody else has thought about how they prepare their students for any sort of redesign.
So I wanted to mention that I've actually posed the question of whether would students actually prefer a flipped format or not, and most of the time they end up voting for a non-flipped version because it's much more work for them, because they have to watch the video, they have to answer questions at home, and then they have to come to class and answer all the questions there. So oftentimes it's twice the work, and they're just not willing to do it.
Yeah, I spun that in my situation. I thought about that in advance, so I spun it as, in this situation, you're doing the learning at home, but you don't have homework. So you don't have to go home and do homework. You have to go home and learn the material. We do the homework in class. So I posed it to them as it's a true flip, where actually, as everybody I think realizes, you do the homework in class, you do the learning outside of class. I don't know if that actually helped their mindsets, but I wonder if a lot of the students, because I have, exactly, as I said, I have the same issue, students just not watching the videos before class. I wonder if these are the same students that probably weren't doing the homework either. They just don't want to do anything at home, whether it be watching videos or homework.
You know, I can say in past semesters with the redesign, I have made big points to them about why I'm doing what I'm doing and how it's different, and you know, we're doing the active learning in class because it shows benefits, and here's the literature, and I said, you know, we're doing the flipped classroom because now you can actually get help in class, and I've done all that, and quite frankly, it falls on deaf ears. I don't think it really helps them much to know all the ins and outs. And so I've gone to more of a global picture. Hey, I've made an awful lot of changes to this class. Here are all the tools I'm supplying to you to be successful. And I'm doing this because in the past, students weren't successful. And now we're getting results that you're more successful, and end of story.
Yeah.
And they tend to appreciate that. In terms of the videos, one of the things I did differently this year, and I'm going to do it every single semester from now on, I've done before, I've given a survey out and asked the students, how many hours a week do you expect to spend on this class? And no surprise, with 60% freshmen, one academic day past high school, they don't expect to spend much time on a college level STEM course. They think, 3 hours a week outside of class is going to cut it. And of course, that's not going to work. And so I outlined for them, no, general rule of thumb is you're going to spend 3 hours total times the number of units. And for a 4-unit class, that's 12 hours. You got 3 hours in class, you've got your lab. Now you got to spend these extra time here. What I did this time around is I outlined for them, here's where I think you're going to spend your time. And I said, here's your total. You're going to spend this much time reading. You're going to spend this much time, doing your homework. You're going to spend this much time rereading your notes or taking new notes. You might spend this much time going to SI, 1 or 2 hours a week. Of course, that's optional. And, we come down to the end of it, and sure enough, it hits that mark. And of course, watching videos is part of that. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I showed them, this is not an extra thing. This is part of the norm. Yeah. And if you watch the videos, you're going to spend less time rereading your notes. You're going to spend less time doing your homework. And I have had so much less pushback on the videos because of it. It may just be this course, right? They've only done this once, but so far it's been quite helpful.
I'd love to know, and maybe this is something we can work on as a cohort, depending on, I don't remember what the profile of classes we all are flipping, or not flipping, but redesigning. I'm wondering how much there is a difference between entry-level classes and upper division classes in terms of what students have come to expect from their classes, and how that influences their willingness to adapt to new classroom approaches. So I'm wondering if, for example, freshmen or entry-level classes, they would be very resistant to a flipped approach if that's not what they expect from high school. But if they've already seen, say, an introductory redesigned class, if they're then more accepting of these sorts of approaches in future classes. Because I'm guessing most of my students resist anything new because it's the first time they've seen something new.
Mm-hmm. So how would you go about putting that together?
I guess you'd have to survey your students and find out what % of the class has seen a similar course design in their personal past before, or you could just break it down by, I don't know how you would study that. Other thoughts?
From my class, well, my class actually doesn't have a high resistance for the intro course. And from the biology department in our school, what they found is the student in the upper division level have a high resistance to the class. Right. But the intro level actually has a lower resistance. Mm-hmm. Part of it because if it's the first time they actually see it, because the intro level, our guess is they don't know beta anyway, so we just tell them this is going to be the way it is. Okay, it's a college course, and that's how it's going to be. Yep. So they kind of accept this, but in the upper division course, especially those students with A's and B's, they actually have a really high resistance because they say, well, why should I change? I've been getting A's with the traditional lecture without any problem. So why suddenly you tell me now the class is not going to be this way? So they see a really high resistance in the upper division course when the student first time they are in the flipped course. But I think if they start from intro level as they move up, probably it's not a problem. Because if they see in the intro level already and they tend to like, if they like it, then it's not going to be a problem.
Very interesting.
I could definitely see that, but I also had a research student who was an excellent student, and he took a fellow colleague's flipped class, and he loved it. He's like, I don't have to do homework. I do all of my learning in class. Like, I don't even need to study for this test. And he was one of those students that got A's previously in the normal traditional lecture format, but he loved it, and he did really well in the class. And so, I know, I could totally see that point too, just that you've never seen it before, you're more open. But I mean, my husband anyway, he has a seniors class and he's doing it where they present the material, right? I feel like at that point, that's where you should be. So I can see both points.
Yeah.
I think it will be interesting to see, a number of us are doing some redesigns here on campus. Carolyn, myself, last year as part of this group were Jinsong and Lisa, and Lisa Kenhammer can't be here today. She's actually teaching class. I think it will be interesting to see over time how students in those classes come to expect different things in their upper division courses later on. Most of these courses are redesigning are freshman, sophomore level now. So 2-3 years from now, when they are juniors or seniors, now what do they come to expect? And then which ones do they appreciate more? I don't know what that outcome will be, but I think it will be interesting nonetheless.
Definitely. Let's make sure we collect the data along the way so we can figure it out.
That's the hard part. What data to collect? Anything else from anyone? We're quickly reaching the end of our time here. I don't know about all of you, but I have office hours at 3.
But speaking of Lisa Kenhammer, she and I are working on a new lab manual, and we've written a lot of in-house content now. And so we are looking for outlets to post this stuff so that people know that it's available for use in case they want to use the experiment. And we're talking like free stuff, right? We're not talking, ACS type stuff. And so I asked this question last Friday to the whole cohort, and it was just one of the chat questions. So they mentioned Merlot.org earlier. I don't know if that's the only place, if anybody knows, like an open source, post your chemistry experiments. Sorry, if anybody knows anything.
OpenStax. I think OpenStax is a nice resource where you can post all sorts of material for, you know, free lectures, free lab material, content that you want to publish. Has anyone used that resource?
Yeah, I use OpenStax, or I did until I started creating my own course manual, but I use OpenStax biology textbooks as sort of supplemental.
Okay.
Let's see. There's a journal. I have, full disclosure, I have nothing to do with this journal, but I have published in it before. It's a peer-reviewed journal. It's called Course Source. And if you develop a lesson plan or a series of lesson plans or an entire course, you can publish it there. It's peer-reviewed, so if you're tenure track, it's actually very useful, which is why I did it. And they take a whole series of different science disciplines, biology and chemistry particularly, but others as well. So if you have something you've developed and you're looking for a publication outlet, and it's still open source, so it's free for people to access, that is. That's one option. If there's nothing else,
I think we're reaching our end.
Yeah.
the azimuth is nigh. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this week. And we'll see you again at our next PLC.
What, in about 4 weeks, right?
That sounds about right. I'll send out another email and a reminder in advance with the link again.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Have a great semester.
All right. Happy weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.